Hi, my name's Steve Usher and welcome to the Experience Designers podcast. Hi and welcome to a brand new episode of the Experience Designers podcast. Today's guest is Chris Raw, Candidate Experience and Innovation Manager at Zalando. And I had the absolute pleasure of spending time with Chris in Berlin, where he shared some of the amazing work they've been doing when creating experience-led values internally within their team, and also shares the importance of measuring the candidate experience and how to use some of those insights to drive innovation across the business. So thanks ever so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, Chris, and welcome to the Experience Designers podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And thank you for having me here in Zalando in Berlin.
Yeah, no worries.
It's definitely warmer than Stockholm. So,
although it's a nice chilly -5 today.
Oh, I think it was about -8 yesterday. It was freezing. So I've been really excited about this conversation today, just because I think we're going to touch on a subject that's super close to my heart, which is around candidate experience. So just for the audience, just an intro into yourself and your role and, what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Chris Raw. I look after candidate experience at Zalando, amongst other things. And I guess I was one of those classic cases of falling into recruitment. I used to be a farmer, actually, funny enough, so it was a very different lifestyle for me back in the day. But after university, I came into recruitment, and I had this passion for sourcing and recognised quite early on that sourcing approaches give very great candidate experiences because of the way that you approach and the right types of talent, and then you have to make sure it's a great experience for them because you're approaching them. And that sort of set off my passions for looking at more experience design, and then also a passion for sort of HR technology as well has led me into the role that I'm in now. Yeah. You have one of the best titles I've come across, actually. When we first connected, I think it was via Katrina Collier, actually. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so I was quite jealous about your title, actually, because if I was to ever work within an organisation permanently, that would be the role I'd kind of want, which is Candidate Experience and Innovation Manager.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's not something I came up with, but you can thank Paul Maxon for that. I used to be the VP of talent acquisition here. And I guess the role is twofold. So I'm a business analyst for the business looking at candidate experience data. So we measure the candidate experience through a survey to candidates from certain points of the process, whether they get an offer or don't get an offer. And that's one part. And then I use the other part of the role to look at how we enable innovation through different processes, or looking at journey mapping to influence where pain points are for our customers, and try to put differences in by working with the recruitment team, working with the employer branding team, or even working with, our technology stack to make sure that we've got the right pieces of tech in there that enable the candidate to have the best experience possible.
Amazing. I've got some questions off of that.
Okay.
So let's break that down. Measuring the candidate experience.
Yeah.
Still challenging for some people, I find.
Yes.
So just tell us a little bit about that journey that you've gone around, how you've, I guess, Chris, we need to measure the candidate experience at Zalando through to then implementing and creating it and then embedding that into the business. How did you go about that?
So I think, first of all, we've only sort of started measuring it for the past sort of 1.5 to 2 years. So we'd already started to talk about measuring the candidate experience long before that I was put into this position. So we have a people analytics team which also measure the employee experience. So it made sense to also have a candidate experience survey. So they worked with the recruitment team to define a set list of questions which are aligned to what we define as our 4 core values. And those are clarity, seamlessness, assessment quality, and interaction quality. We also couple those values with the classic NPS question, and also a satisfaction question, which is measured in what we call a CSAT score.
Yeah.
And we'd been sort of sending that survey out to candidates who'd finished the process with us, and looking at it almost slices and dices how we can look at certain candidate groups. So, for example, many people measure NPS as a core metric. NPS is great, but it's a loyalty metric. So it means that you have to dig further. So you can't just, how was your experience? Oh, well, it was 9 out of 10. Great. Okay, so that's good. But if someone says it's a 4 out of 10, like, okay, so we know that it's bad, but where do we look? So you need to also have questions which support NPS as well.
Yes.
So especially when it comes down to change.
Yes. I see. I found your approach really interesting, because I think there's just taking, I guess, some of the learning from the kind of customer experience industry, and they tend to be obviously far more advanced and are using NPS for many years. There's kind of an approach where I think what I really liked about Zalando's approach was how you set your own values internally, what you're going to maintain, rather than be led by necessarily what the candidate feedback was necessarily saying. Because sometimes you do NPS and then you look for your themes, which naturally you did from the feedback. But I really like the approach where you said, no, this is how we're going to behave. This is how we're going to deliver a great experience internally first, and built it inside out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think we do listen to the candidates as well in terms of, comments and things like that. And they add the reality of what happens, I think. But like what you said, you've got to stay true to what you've defined as value, being the core values. And we have other values on top of that, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I think we still need to create these insights from candidates, whether that's through a survey or whether that's through workshops with former candidates, so we can develop these insights to better create solutions for the future. But it really depends on, where your problem areas are. So, for example, in these survey results, it could be that interaction quality is down, and that could mean that you're not giving feedback on a more regular basis, or perhaps the interaction quality with the interviewers wasn't hitting all the notes as it should be.
Yeah.
So sometimes the comments can tell you these things, and that adds a little bit more context to some of the changes that you might want to do. But also gives you that, it's quite powerful to tell people who are involved in the process. So in terms of, like with any storyline or any sort of, if you think about a movie, a good movie has got a good storyline. It's, you follow it as you watch as a journey, but it's also got a star of the show, which is the candidate. It's also got other actors, supporting actors, cameos, which are kind of the people who make the process. So whether that's the recruiter, whether it's the interviewer, whether it's the hiring manager. And if they don't interact well, then it's not going to be a good film, is it? So I think this is kind of the way that we try to look at things and look at how we, see points of view from all of those different angles to then be able to support them in enabling the right experience for the star of the show, which is the candidate.
Yeah. And you built out a dashboard as well of some sort, with some traffic lights. I saw the little traffic lights.
Yeah.
So just to kind of elaborate on that and how you've used that internally within the business.
So, I mean, it's an optional thing to use. We don't push it so much, but it's there as a tracker in case. So, for example, a recruiter could have a problem with speed in their recruiting process. So the data might be telling them that from the tool that we use. And they can go and investigate that further and come up with, one action that they will take to try and change this. And then they will look at trying to see how that influences the NPS score, or the CSAT score later on down the line. So, for example, could be that, they find out that they've got a problem with speed in the process. They investigate further using the data, and they find out that when they look at the funnel, it could mean that the hiring manager's holding on to CVs because they might have been on holiday or something like that.
Yeah.
So they can put in a change where it's like, okay, could be simple change like the hiring manager having a delegate for reviewing CVs for a particular position if they're away on a trip or something like this.
Yes.
Could be something as simple as that, or it also could be something quite complicated as well. The simple change, the scorecard's there to enable the recruiters to make simple changes to their own processes. Whereas the more complicated changes are the things that, I guess, affect all recruiters or all recruitment processes, and will be explored more in a workshop, design thinking journey kind of way.
Fantastic. So I think there's lots of recruiters out there who would really value some kind of insights like that, even on like that micro level, because that helps them influence, ultimately kind of desensitizes. You know, if it's a particular hiring manager issue, then you can come armed with some data and some really good credible kind of feedback to then influence or to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think generally in the recruitment industry, or the talent acquisition industry, we're talking about this movement from transactional recruiter to talent advisor model, which has been talked about a lot. And I think recruiters can get there quite easily. It's just their ability to be able to consume data and be able to tell stories with it is going to be the key to being able to move towards that talent advisor model. And I think certainly candidate experience plays a big part in that going forward. And I'm a big believer in that. You have, two sets of metrics. You have experience metrics, which are the NPS, the CSAT scores, but also perhaps some of the value metrics that you get from sending surveys out. That tells a story when you talk to a hiring manager about, if it's a bad experience or even if it's a good experience. But to fix some of those things, you actually have to start looking at the transactional data. So things like time, speed, quality, how many people are getting through the funnel at certain stages. How many silver medalists do you have later on? And I think that's the next challenge that we've got, is to how do we maximize the amount of silver medalists, or how do we recycle candidates through other processes in a better way? Yes. Because ultimately, I think it'll be the same with many organizations. You have a set amount of hires per year, but actually you get through a lot more candidates than that. And this whole mantra of candidates are customers, well, it's very true. I think if you don't believe that, then you're missing a trick, because I think there's many, many benefits to treating candidates well. And I think what we need to move away from is actually thinking that it's just this one-off application. It's actually the candidate experience starts much, much before anyone else thinks. I think it's on an individualized basis, is when that person interacts with the brand for the first time. Yeah, agree.
And so does your work extend all the way up to that funnel? I mean, you talked about some of the work cross-functional with employer brand earlier on. So do you go right the way up to perhaps the right at the top of the awareness stage in the funnel?
Yeah, so I guess going back to how I ended up in this position, I was a sourcer at Zalando, and what I'd realised was that the way German data law works is different to perhaps other countries, and you basically have shorter time to keep up with relationships. Right. So we had a need to have a CRM system, or at least a few use cases, and so I built those use cases out as a sort of side project to my job, and then try to go out and change the way we hired. Yeah. And that process took a longer period of time than expected, but mainly because of GDPR issues and things like this. But yeah, I mean, that was what led me into the candidate experience role. So that enabled me to work with the employer branding team to look at, what kind of content is relevant. And this goes back to some of the other values that we have at Zalando about candidate experience. One of them is relevancy. So talking about personalization and what using personas to make sure that the content that you deliver or the promises that you deliver to candidates are something that's going to be relevant and something for them to take up. Yeah. So that's how I've worked with the employer branding team further up the funnel. Yeah. But I would say the main the main body of work, 80%, is really in the recruitment team.
Yeah. Because
it's where a lot of things have the tendency to go good, bad, or ugly. so I think that's again why we put so much effort into measuring the experience. So then we are able to tell a story, know whether it's good or not, and then put something right if it's not right.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier as well about obviously measuring, and then there's the other bit which I'm really interested in is about what's come out of it. What kind of themes did you recognise started to come out? I think hiring manager was potentially one of those. I'd like to also explore the whole guild kind of stuff as well. But yeah, no, just to get a feel for what were some of the key themes that you guys identified, a much more kind of higher level that you thought, right, from a process or operational point of view, we need to tackle.
So before you tackle a journey, I think it's always good to know who your customers are. And I think, well, in this case, it's the candidate. So we're trying to improve the experience of the candidate. But I'm a big believer in if you're going to deliver a great candidate experience, you've also got to understand the experience of the recruiter, the hiring manager, and the interviewer. And that's kind of what we tried to do. We've done it more with the hiring manager, I would say, than necessarily the recruiter experience or the interview experience, but that'll get tackled in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
I think, so we would look at the experience from those points of view. And for example, for a candidate experience point of view, we would usually do a journey mapping exercise. So we partnered with our business and did this design thinking workshop. And we explored some of the insights, the likes and dislikes and emotions at different points in the stage. So first of all is to map out your journey. So which are the main stages as well? And we looked at, certainly the job search stage.
Yeah.
And then we looked at the application process. And then what we realised soon, when you walk through the candidate's shoes, in real time, what actually happens is you end up waiting a lot of the time. So we actually added waiting stages in between all of those stages because it's actually the reality of what happens for the candidate.
Yeah, moments between the moments.
Yeah. And then there's the interview process, then there's the offer, and then there's onboarding. So those are the main stages that we tackled. And there was, I guess, when you go through that process, you can find lots of insights, lots of emotions generated. But generally speaking, what we saw was candidates actually are not that attached to having recruiter contacts or human contact in the first stages of the process. So they're looking for a more seamless experience there. So a good example is, I land on a job search, I do a job search, I want to get the right job.
Yeah.
I want to be able to get to the right job first. So that's one element of it. And then I want to read the job advert and then get the clarity that I need to be able to apply. And then after that, it becomes more, does the CV upload work? Is that working properly? And then, it could be something simple like that. And these are little things that candidates might moan about, but they're not that important. They will still push through them when they rank them against other, something like an offer stage,
Yes.
And this is what we've sort of found out. Waiting became actually something that they recognised as being something where we needed to improve because actually I think that's just generally an industry thing. I think it's easy to forget about candidates when you're focusing on lots of different things in the recruitment process.
Yeah.
So especially when you're pushing people through a pipeline or shortlisting, or keeping candidates on hold, that classic stage that used to cause all sorts of reporting problems with ATSs, where you find these hidden bunch of candidates in a process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going fast forwarding to the other end of the process. So when it starts to get more business end, so being invited for an interview, that's where they expect a lot more human contact. They actually prefer a more consultative approach from the recruiter. And also they expect a level of cohesion on the interview day. So, and I think this is one of the things where if you're a company that does multiple interviews on a day, it's so important to get that cohesion right and make sure that things are all sort of seamless on the day. But they also expect that interaction quality. Interviewers to be well prepared, know what they're talking about, but also be able to ask challenging questions that are relevant to the job. And there's a lot of work that we do with our interviewing teams and hiring managers to make sure that the questions they ask are challenging, but also relevant as well.
Yeah. So how did you tackle that? So how is it, in terms of enabling or providing people with the tools to be able to do that? What kind of activities or what kind of solutions did you create to help kind of support that kind of part of the experience?
So again, I think there was a lot of, so just to rewind a little bit, we also did the hiring manager journey, and we did that through like focus group style interviews, like one-on-one, so we could get the real issues of their problems or what their pain points were. And then what we did was we mapped that out and then overlaid it over the top of the candidate journey.
Nice.
And then we had to sort of see where there was overlaps, and then that told us where to fix first. So, for example, I think, when we look at, expected excellence, where the hiring manager expects excellence from us, it was the briefing process.
Right.
Because obviously that sets the tone of how the recruitment project's going to go.
Yes.
So they wanted more consultative approach at that point, and that became quite an important part for the candidate as well, because if we don't get the briefing part right, then we're going to promise them something that is not there.
Yes.
So it's important to make sure that we set the guidelines there. But the main stage that we saw where there was huge overlap was the interview. The interview was, something that they both saw as, I guess, where moments that matter occurs, or at least the most important ones. Because obviously it's the first, when you think about it from the candidate's point of view, it's probably the first human contact that they've had.
Yeah.
And then when you think about it like that, then everyone who's part of that business is be living and breathing the business.
Yeah.
Because that's also what the candidate expects.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, and I think that's what many people forget. And it goes back to one of the metrics that we would probably look at including next year is looking at customer effort score.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
How
it's a good one.
So, for example, customer effort score is looking at how much effort that person has to go through at that stage. And then when you apply that to the different roles, so when you apply that, let's say take the interview stage, for example, you have a candidate that's got high effort because they want to impress.
Yeah.
You've got a recruiter that wants to, have a good performance on that vacancy. So their effort score is very high.
Yes.
The hiring manager obviously has a high effort score, or should do, because it's their vacancy. They know that there are other team members in their team, working hard to cover that empty desk. And then the interviewer, maybe it's not so much a high effort score, because often from a pool of interviewers, so they get pulled in from different expertise. So they might not be hiring someone for their particular area, and they might be coming from the reality of the day-to-day business, coming out of a meeting. And actually for them to, really perform, we have to enable them to have the right information in the right format so that they take that information and be able to digest it and then still give that great performance or great brand experience at the interview stage.
Yeah, super important. I think the whole, I think certainly human first contact, I think, is often underrated actually, and perhaps sometimes that transactional thing kicks in where, you might have multiple telephone interviews booked in a day, is just to make sure their values as a recruiter, as a, working in talent, is that, you have that very much in your mind constantly at that first point of contact. Super important. So tell me about some of the solutions you guys built out from some of the insights. What some of the kind of the activities and initiatives that this then kicked off and you started to work on?
Yeah, so I think some of the solutions. So we built solutions for both candidate and hiring manager.
Yeah.
So I think I alluded to one a little bit before, going a bit off topic, but the briefing stage was something that we redesigned. So for example, we look at we now call it strategy meeting.
Great.
Because if you think about how it's traditionally been called in the past, recruitment intake meeting,
job order.
Yeah, job order. So it's just like,
I'm placing an order for a job. Yeah.
And I think this is, so it doesn't set off, the language doesn't set everything off on the right tone. So we changed it to strategy meeting, and there's a lot of information there, but we make it so the recruiter can, take and leave what they want, because ultimately we want to empower them to be able to control, what happens. But there's also this element now where we take data to the first meeting. We will ideally, bring candidate experience data. We'll bring the transactional recruitment data. So the things like time to hire, what are the median times per stage usually on the last time we hired this vacancy. So in the last 12 months, we've built out that functionality. Our head of recruitment's done a marvellous job in
Sounds amazing.
Being able to visualize the data in a pretty much real time kind of way. So we have like monitors around the recruitment team office now, where you can see, for your job family, where how many candidates are at certain stages and different things like this. So we're very, very data driven now, much more than we were before. And I think that's something that we take to the briefing meeting now, or the strategy meeting.
Yeah.
And it's not just that; it's also taking perhaps CVs that we've been able to generate from our talent pools or from our CRM, or whether there's some people that we might have been keeping warm for this particular vacancy once it comes up. So we're able to control a conversation with the hiring manager, rather than traditionally how I remember it 10 years ago when I first started in-house recruitment. It was more just being you did take the order, didn't you?
You did.
It was just like, okay.
If you got a date in the diary, it was gold. That was the golden egg, wasn't it?
Yeah. Would you want what kind of sauce would you like with that? It's just, so it was kind of felt like that experience, and I think generally it's changed now, and I think it's got to change if you want to sort of be seen as this true business partner.
Yes.
And that's kind of the feedback that we had from hiring managers, where they spoke about this need for a consultative approach in recruitment, and I think we all have that. It's just, I think definitely what helps that is bringing data to the table and being able to tell stories from that.
And what was the perspective from the recruiters of the hiring managers? So the hiring managers wanted more consultative. What did the recruiters want of the hiring managers? Just out of interest, is there anything from that?
I don't think we captured that, but I can imagine what, I think like with anything, we're very time conscious here because of the amount of hires that we have to make. And I think that can erode away some of the working styles sometimes, because of the way that we have to hire. It's quite, we hire, 3,000 people a year here. And we've got quite a large recruitment team. And I think the opportunity to have those touch points with the hiring manager, we have to really commit to them. And I think sometimes the hiring managers were probably not as non-committal as sometimes, I would say.
Yes.
But I think this is all about a relationship process and building relationships. And I think, again, going back to the changes that we made, being able to bring better data to the argument will help create these more trusting relationships with hiring managers. And I mean, the relationships between recruiter and hiring manager here are great. It's just that, how do you take that to the next level? That's what we're always looking to try and do, and hopefully some of these changes will do that.
Yeah.
And that's the first big change that we did. The second was kind of, I guess, looking at scheduling. So scheduling was a big change.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily part of the work stream that we did, but scheduling is complicated when you add many diaries to the mix.
Yes.
Especially, more senior level hires, for example, to try and get diary time between, 5 vice presidents, who might be interviewing on the day, could just be, 2 or 3 of them. And it's, because obviously business takes place, other business meetings and things like this. And I think that becomes complicated. And I think, implementing a tool like a scheduling tool is one of the things that we did last year, which I think saw some of the best results that I've seen in trials and things like that.
Fantastic.
But yeah, so scheduling tools have helped. So that's when we've implemented a bit of technology.
Yeah.
When you pick tools, it's usually dictated by what you've already got. Because if you want to have a plug-in and play strategy, you really have to have something that's easily connected to. So we use Greenhouse as an ATS, and luckily one of the best experiences I've had working at Zalando has been able to work with our tech team. So certainly working with people like Chung and Zhao, who've helped us build on top of Greenhouse APIs, and whether it's anything from products like building anonymization to logics, or whether it's an app for candidates to see where they are in the process. These are some of the things that we've done and self-built. Yeah. And I think when we look at like tech stack, I think to truly get a great experience, I think a blend of bought tech and built tech is the best combo. Yeah. If you can make them fit together.
Yeah.
And that's the $64 million question, isn't it, all the time? And I think generally, I think when you scale as a business, like we've grown 25% roughly year on year for the last 4 years that I've been here. Wow. So naturally, it's the kind of Zalando's a little bit like a teenager with growing pains, I would say. It's probably the right age now. But it's a wonderful company to work for, because I think we're innovating all the time, we're changing all the time. So we is one of my colleagues, Manjuri, who heads up the tech recruitment team here, said we eat change for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's very, very true. And I think certainly the offer process is quite a delicate moment to manage, because I think there's high emotion at that point. There's high stress because a candidate has got what they wanted, and now they want the contract so they can
the expectations,
set the ball rolling on other parts of their life, you know. So yes. And then also, we're relocating people as well, so that becomes something. And certainly what I see is the sort of business end of the stage, which is this stage that people call pre-boarding, is where it starts from kind of where the offer's made all the way through to their first day on the onboarding, and what happens during that period is actually so crucial. So there's a lot of keeping in touch with candidates and to making sure that it doesn't go silent. And I know that we've made some changes to our onboarding process as well to make sure that it's a little bit more standardised as we've grown as well. Yes, that's been really important for us.
Yeah, I mean, someone on like a 3-month notice period, their current employer's got 12 weeks to chip away emotionally, just to kind of, and it happens, buybacks and counters, as we know. To keep that, to kind of start to bring them into maybe the Zalando family or team earlier in the process, the better, just with that regular contact or interactions.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that space evolve, especially when it comes to technology recently. There's some great tools out there which utilise this ideation of nudging.
Yes.
Because I think ultimately we're all busy people, and sometimes the nudges can help us to do the most important things on time and really be there for the candidate. And I think, yeah, I think that's something that I see developing in the future as well.
I think there was a Australian tool that's making some waves. Onboardy, I think it's Onboardy.
Yeah, I think there's one that I forgot the name of it now. HR on board, I think there's one that I know from Australia. But Nboard is the one that I've seen recently. That's the one. That's interesting. And
yes.
I know you can try that out on their website with just by putting your number in. It actually works really well. So yeah, props to them. But yeah, I think, and then I think, yeah, there's other things that we've done as well. Like we did a recent experience with a chatbot on our careers site, which was,
how's that been?
It was interesting. So we did the chatbot exercise for like 5 to 6 weeks. We're probably going to extend it for a little bit longer, just to learn from the experience. But ultimately, what we did was we created a FAQs chatbot that lived on our careers site, and we just wanted to see how our candidates interacted. And I know we've spoken about this before about, you know, where you put your listening posts in the process to listen to candidate feedback. And one of them that we kind of slightly ignored a little bit is before people make an application. So this is the perfect place for an FAQ bot to live, because it can be a virtual career assistant to the candidate and help them convert into an application if they get the right answer.
Yeah.
So we spent, a month, I would say, training the chatbot to speak our language, our tone of voice, and also with the right answers. We scaled the testing to about a team of about 35 recruiters and recruiter coordinators who spent 2 hours hammering the chatbot in different personas. So imagine you're a candidate who's about to apply for a job. What kind of questions would you ask? Yeah. And then they'd spend. So we were able to see how the chatbot performed based on the first initial training that we did, and then realised the more we trained it, the more it started to become more accurate.
Yeah.
I think we ended up on creating about 40 different categories of questions. So we were very well prepared. And then I think we had roughly about 70%, 72% accuracy for the trial period, which was good. We had lots of interactions, but again, going back to the candidate to customers, we're an e-commerce, very popular e-commerce brand in Europe, 24 million customers across, I think, 15 countries.
Yeah.
So first of all, you will get customer-based questions. So where's my package? There's quite something that we got, I would say, 1 in 10 questions.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I can't prove how much we would lose from giving bad experiences like some of the more famous case studies out there.
Yes.
But certainly there's definitely some truth in it, because I think candidates or customers, they just see Zalando. They just see the brand.
Yeah.
They don't care whether it's a careers bot or they just want an answer.
Yeah.
And I think, but then what we realized from that was like, okay, there's a demand for this question. Let's create a category. So we created a category with the chatbot where we were able to redirect our customers back to the right place where to go. So actually it became a good experience for the customer as well.
Yes.
So what this gave us was more interesting data, that about 60 to 70% of our questions were job discovery related.
Okay.
So now that's led us to look at job discovery and doing that through a chatbot in 2019.
Yeah. Does that also drive some of the elements around some of the insights of the job actually available at the time as well, rather than via a chatbot? Because maybe they're asking the chatbot because it's not available on the screen.
Totally.
So it just feeds it the other way as well.
That's something that we've been discussing in recent conversations about how we execute that.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the chatbot would only be able to tell what's on the job advert. You would have to store data somewhere else and host it somewhere else and be able the chatbot to interact with that data to then be able to pull that. And I think for the challenges doing that for 800 live jobs is very hard.
Yeah.
So yes, in baby steps, we'll look to try and achieve that, but that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to deliver a personal experience to the power of one for any candidate, no matter whether they land on the careers homepage or whether they land on, the actual job page. They get the relevant questions at that moment in time. It goes back to my point about relevancy being the next tipping point for candidate experience and being able to go to the next level. Because ultimately that's what people want. When you ask a question, you expect the answer. And I think one of the other things that I did notice from the chatbot, from the FAQs, is just one little observation, which I thought, when you tell people that it's a chatbot, they treat it like dirt. I mean, or some people do. So we've had many swear words. We've had, if it's kicked out the wrong answer, let's say, because of a training issue, or, so we've had to go back and correct that, and they've given, feedback, I'm just thinking, well, would you say that to someone's face? So I think there's possibly a society problem in the future about
the online
how we interact. Because I think when people hide behind a keyboard, they can say things that they would never normally say. But also, on the positive side of that, you might entice a wider, more diverse group of candidates to engage with you as an employer, because it's easier to interact behind a keyboard. So I think there's a challenge to make candidate experiences personable to the power of one going forward, depending on what type of character people are as well. And I think that's, again, we're also looking at approaching, for different subsets of candidate experience. So things like, which channel did you come through? How do agencies give a great experience? Or, even if it's, if you are looking at like a diverse set of candidates, how do you design an experience for someone who might be blind or who's deaf, who wants to apply for a job? I think these types of questions will become more important in the future as well. Yeah,
interesting. There needs to be some kind of module or bolt-on into the chatbot around managing people behaviour or poor or bad behaviour or interactions.
Oh, totally.
Something to...
But I think chat's been an interesting experience for me, because I think I truly believe that chat is the interface tool of the candidate. And if we can make chat interfaces interact better with the systems that we have, so for example, without naming any providers out there, there are definitely better experiences than some others, ATS-wise and things like this.
Of course.
You can use chatbots to make that experience tighter, if it's not traditionally a great experience, user experience going through a process with one of these providers. So I think chatbots and chat interfaces can help with this. It's an engagement tool, it's a content tool, it's an interaction tool, and ultimately I think it's native to the candidate because of all the different platforms. And I'd love to see an experience where you can finish a conversation on any platform you want. In the same way that, I might start a conversation with my friend on WhatsApp, but finish it on Messenger.
Yes.
And sometimes with my friend, he loses the context sometimes, even though it's with me. But obviously, there's obvious reasons why. But I honestly believe in the future, when it's interacting with an ATS, I honestly think you can finish the conversation on whatever platform you want in the future. And it'd still be, it'll still mean something to recruit, or the recruit can still access that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm struggling with all of the messaging platforms. Just because there's, there's 4 regularly that I use every day, I would say, and it's just nice to have one for all eventually.
Yeah,
maybe.
I use WhatsApp and Messenger more than I use SMS, which is weird.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be. You can't just cut yourself off to one. I mean, when we did the trial for the chatbot, we did it as a trial, so it was only on the website. So there's a specific use case. In the future, for job discovery, we'd have to look at where that crowd likes to be. Is it Messenger? Is it WhatsApp? Or is it on like an iframe on the website?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, you still have to go back to who is your customer, who is the persona that you're trying to target and engage with, and go back to basics thinking like that. And I think, you can't go wrong when you really approach it with a customer focused mindset and put yourself in the customer's shoes.
So, one last question or area I want to cover off, because I've picked up quite a bit of a theme in a lot of the discussion today. And I'm just now kind of transporting into perhaps a listener working within talent or HR, perhaps looking to make a change or to create a movement within their business. And maybe they're not really, they're thinking about some of the stuff we've talked about, perhaps haven't really engaged it. But one of the things that I think would be really valuable would be how you've engaged the business, because you've mentioned lots of different functions and skill sets in various parts of the conversation today. So I'd really love to understand how you would encourage somebody or to approach the business and start to then create the movement or start to engage the business in order to scale or create, start doing some of these stuff. Definitely.
So I think it's evolved over time, and as it still will. I think that there's 5 big lessons that I've learned.
Great.
I think in this role. To be more effective. But I think, generally speaking, you've got to be value-led. I think if you have values about how candidates or your customers should be treated, then I think that sets the tone for a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
If you know that you're delivering a bad candidate experience, if you've got data to prove that, go and shout it from the hilltops.
Yeah. Because
people will listen. I think, because ultimately, if you keep treating candidates badly, that soon gets out on all sorts of different mediums, and then you don't have the power to control that. So control it with the data that you have, and start telling a story with it.
Yeah.
Think about the platforms in your company that you can do this in. So whether it's like an intranet way, or whether it's an email way, or whether it's in a team meeting way. Or even if it's in an all-hands bigger meeting kind of way, whatever it is, tell a story. And I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that I would say when you're trying to get a use case off. I also have the use cases, so go and learn how to write use cases. So partner with your business, search on Google. Searching on Google was the quicker way for me. There's many different ways, but ultimately, if you can show different reasons why a change needs to happen, then people again will listen to you because you've done the research, you've done the data. But I think ultimately listening to your customer is the biggest thing that I've learned in this role. I've also learned that feedback is a gift.
Yeah.
That classic saying, or, drop feedback, not bombs, is another one that I've used before.
Nice.
Because I think, and this is not just for, candidate feedback, this is also your ability to listen to people who want to moan about a process or tell the truth, the real truths about the realities of how candidates are dealt with, or what it's like for a hiring manager to hire at a company. Because you pick out, again, it goes back to picking out the insights, and you can only get that from listening.
Yeah.
And ultimately, ideation is really important, but you can't do that without this feedback or these insights generated.
Yeah.
So that goes into like, you can't really change effectively what you can't measure.
Yeah.
And so again, going back well before what I've just said, is probably start measuring something and figure out, you will know as a recruiter through just experience of going through a few processes what kind of rough issues are there. Yeah. And then if you can start to measure that, then you can start to shine a light on it. And then you can go deeper than that and start to bring in other data sets and start to analyze it in much, much more pinpointy ways.
Yeah.
And to the power of where, at Zalando, we could, if there's someone who was, holding up a process, we could find out who that is. And we could, again, it's not about telling off, it's about encouraging and enabling. And I think that's understanding what's happening in their world so that you can design a better solution.
Yeah.
I don't think if we can get to a stage where you can do that consistently on a personalized basis for hiring managers and things like this, that's the real place to go to. That's the real nirvana for me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, also when you're shining the light on certain areas, really focus and obsess. Don't go, you know, all vanilla on everything, because I think really prioritize what changes are important to you. And it goes back to you defining what your values are, not just as a recruiter, but also as a business as well, and try to bring them back into the recruitment process.
Fantastic. So, Chris, it's whizzed by. I can't believe how quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
A really great conversation. And so I will put your link and stuff in the bio if anybody wants to kind of get in touch. And look, thank you so much for having me here at Zalando today. I know we've spoken a few times in recent years, but it's an absolute pleasure to properly meet today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Wishing you all the very best for the future.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Take care.
Take care.
Cheers.
And there you have it, another episode of the Experienced Designers podcast. Thank you so much to my guest, Chris Raw. Chris, thank you for hosting me in Berlin. I had an absolute blast, and wishing you all the very best of luck for the future. In the meantime, if you like what you hear, please like, rate, share, print a t-shirt, do whatever is necessary to help me build this movement and community across the globe. So until the next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.